Okay. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Today, we're talking about impact reporting for good and what some of the key issues are related to that. My name is John Pepin. I'm Chief Executive of Philanthropy Impact. For us, measuring impact is really quite difficult because we're an infrastructure support group. And so if you're a direct service charity, then it's a lot easier to report to a certain extent, although we'll hear through this webinar what the issues are. Um, it's also interesting ultimately to deal with the whole issue of impact and emotive asks, and how we balance those things out. And I'm sure the three speakers will be addressing that and from their perspectives. So I'm going to ask each one now to introduce themselves, talk a tiny bit about who they are and what they're doing, and then to also outline the importance of reporting impact within their context. Okay, so Emily, can we start with you?
Hi, hello everybody. I'm Emily Shaw. I'm Head of Sustainable Solutions for Cazenove Capital, which is the wealth management division of the Schroders Group. I have the privilege of working with our investors who are looking to invest away from harmful companies and towards those that are creating the solutions that will make a greener and fairer world more achievable. The role of impact reporting within this is incredibly important. We are designing solutions for our clients who want to use their capital to create positive outcomes for people and the planet, as well as profit. And being able to demonstrate the impact that that decision is having enables us to be able to demonstrate the outcomes that are being achieved and the alignment to that intention. It also helps inspire others to do good with their capital as well. If you can demonstrate the positivity that comes from making one investment decision compared to another, it helps, give that inspiration to others that this is a great way that you can invest, both in order to achieve your financial goals as well as creating a greener and fairer world.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Alex.
Thank you, John. And hello, everybody. My name's Alex Hayes. I'm Director of Philanthropy at MPC, or New Philanthropy Capital. I spend a lot of my time working with funders and philanthropists in order to help them understand how they can create the greatest impact that they can. Prior to working at MPC, I was a head of strategic funding programs at the National Lottery Community Fund, which is a very large funder. So have spent a lot of time wading through impact data and financial reporting through that. I think that a lot of this runs at the heart of what MPC does. MPC was set up 25 years ago by a group of philanthropists who really wanted to find a better level of data and impact and understanding of impact from the charities they were looking to support. And we support both sides of that picture now. We support funders to help understand the difference they want to make, and we help charities to really understand their theory of change and to measure their impact as well. And I think it's vitally important. I mean, my perspective is often for the philanthropists and donors that I work with, but they will have limited pots of funding. They cannot fund everything that comes through the door, and they really need to understand where they can best make a positive impact as an organization. And often that will be those organizations who can prove the difference that they are making, which is often coming through impact data.
Oh, terrific. Okay, thank you very much. And Imogen, thank you very much for joining us. I know you're on holiday, so I hope you're having a good time, except for now.
Thank you, John. No, I'm in extremely windy on the Northumberland coastline,
Oh, okay.
but delighted to join. So I'm Imogen. I'm from SOS Children's Villages. I'm the Senior Philanthropy Manager. What that means is I look after our philanthropists based in the UK. SOS Children's Villages is one of the largest INGOs in the world, actually. But a lot of people haven't heard of us because we don't have programming in the UK, but we do work in over 130 countries and territories around the world to help children who have lost parental care and to help strengthen families where they are at risk of losing the care of their children. For me, in my role, impact reporting is incredibly important because I'm able to utilise it to show donors and their advisors the real world difference that their money makes, not just on activities delivered. And that obviously helps build trust and long-term relationships. But also it makes for stronger and more compelling funding proposals, because it allows us to understand what's genuinely working for children and families, and to tweak our programming accordingly, and also to direct report support where it is needed most. As Alex said, there's always limited funding and a huge amount of competition for it.
Terrific, thank you. Now, it looks like we're operating right across the spectrum of capital here, from impact investing right through to philanthropic giving and service delivery within that context. So it's a good representation. Emily, let's start with you. Can you talk a bit about the approach that Casanova Capital is taking to measuring impact? And then maybe we can ask Imogen after what she's doing or what your organization's doing, and if there's a difference between a direct service delivery organization reporting versus what you're doing around impact investing and impact. Okay, so Emily, go ahead.
Absolutely. So first of all, I would like to just say, I mean, you did mention the spectrum of capital there, and that's incredibly important in my world of investing. We genuinely believe that every single investment decision has an impact. The degree of that impact on the world around us will vary significantly based on the type of investment and the intention behind that investment. So that's an important thing to caveat. But we do agree that there is some degree of impact for every investment decision. So as a starting point, what we do for our clients, and our clients will vary across that spectrum of capital, to those who are entirely financial first driven, to those who are absolutely intending to use their capital to deliver real world impact. We will report sustainability and impact insights for every one of our clients for all of their portfolios, regardless of where they sit on that spectrum. And that's because we think it's really important for people to understand that their investment decisions will have a degree of impact. For our solutions where we are specifically trying to create measurable environmental and social outcomes, we will go into a much greater level of detail of the underlying impacts that can be achieved through those investment strategies. And as a starting point, what we do is look to categorize every one of our investments in line with whether they are simply avoiding harm, so, investing away from harmful companies, or avoiding significant negative impacts, which is what we categorize as an avoidance of harm, but not creating material impact, to investments which are creating tangible benefits for stakeholders. And that will include things like companies with really good corporate cultures that have diversity and employment practices that are helping to promote inclusion and diversity within the workforce, or strong environmental policies that are helping that organization to transition towards net zero. That's what we see as a well-run and good sustainable business. But once again, we wouldn't think that that's kind of creating tangible material impacts through investing in that company. We then get to our third category, which is those investments and underlying companies whose activities are materially contributing towards achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And this is the solution providers, the kind of investments that, renewable energy, social housing, microfinance in developing economies, the kind of activities where we are directly channeling capital into programs that are looking to address areas of unmet environmental and social needs. And this is what we will categorize as the higher impact investments. Once we've defined that bucket, we will drill down even further to look at the level of outcomes that are being achieved. For instance, the amount of people that are being housed, the amount of renewable energy that is being generated, and our contribution to that outcome based on our level of investment or our engagement activities. And that's an important distinction to make, because there's two main ways that you can create impact for investments. It's both through the provision of capital, so helping projects to scale, helping businesses to have lower cost of capital, as well as your engagement with that company or project, where you can perhaps be highlighting to that business where you think that they can make improvements on ESG factors that should create impact over time, or supporting them in scaling their businesses and encourage them to expand those more beneficial impact aspects of the operation. So we will categorize those activities and expand that up to a portfolio level. So we can see both the underlying company's contributions to impacts and the total portfolio level, and align these outcomes to our theory of change, which is where we're trying to create long-term systemic change. The big limitation that we have here, and I know we will come on to talk about limitations, is the ability to then connect those outputs with long-term outcomes in the world. Because, for instance, if we're investing in social housing trusts and they're housing X amount of people, that's wonderful and that's a great output to see. But it's very difficult to then assess the level of poverty that's reducing, the level of inclusion that's creating on a long-term forward-looking basis. So that is an absolute limitation.
So can I ask you a question about what you're saying? Because when I look at the wealth management ecosystem, are you relatively unique in the approach that you're taking compared to other wealth management firms?
Well, we would definitely like to say that we are demonstrating best practice in our field. We've been doing this for a very long time and we have a very authentic approach. We've also gone as far as to have our impact reporting and impact investing approach externally verified by an industry expert, just to give that added layer of accreditation that this is not only a leading approach to reporting impact, but it's most importantly authentic. And I think that would stand us apart from a number of our peers in the field. And also the level of analysis that we do on the underlying. Obviously, lots of wealth managers are investing in pooled vehicles, so other managers' funds, and therefore there's a degree of separation to the underlying selection of the underlying investment. We make sure that in all of our investment strategies, we're looking through to the underlying company level, even when it's within a pooled fund, to get that granularity of data and weight it by our contribution based on our level of investment, even at the underlying company level. So we are relatively unique in the degree of kind of verification and granularity that we go into for our approach.
Okay. I'm going to ask one more question and then I'll move on to Imogene. But there's different models out there for wealth management firms. Everything from just maximizing financial return right through to having values-led approach and values-led discussions as an essential part of each discussion, leading to whole issues around how they want to, in effect, use their money. And what we're seeing is that with Gen Z, millennials, and women of wealth, there's a big significant shift that's taken place with these young wealthy people or women of wealth. And especially now that women of wealth control about 70% of liquid assets and they're going to inherit even more. So as your model around values-led discussion, sounds like that's what you do. Our perception is that it's different from a lot of other firms who don't quite go that far. Is it an essential part of each discussion that an advisor has to have?
Absolutely. It's mandatory that every single one of our clients is asked what their view is on sustainability and that they are given appropriate information about the options that are available to them across the spectrum of capital. It forms a really essential part of our suitability assessments. And I think that is probably genuinely one of the reasons why we've been one of the few managers who've actually been able to scale the amount of investment that we have in sustainable and impact strategies, which, we now have over 13.6 billion that's invested in some kind of values aligned approach on behalf of our clients. And that's risen from 3 billion in 2019. So very significant growth, and that far outstrips what we've seen from our peers. Many of our peers will say it's lack of appetite and that clients aren't asking for this. Well, we should say you should be asking them. It's not their responsibility to raise that topic with you. And actually, a huge amount of research shows that one of the biggest barriers to more people adopting a sustainable impact approach is because they weren't given the option by their advisor, and they found that they had to raise it themselves if it was going to be an option. So we wanted to address that first and foremost. It's also one of the reasons why we added the sustainability reporting into our valuations for all clients. So it's an easy way to introduce that topic. You know, if you've got a client who's never raised it before, you can say to them, here you can see the carbon footprint of your portfolio and the social dividend versus the benchmark. Like, how does that make you feel? Would you like to improve that? There's lots of ways that we could do that. So it's a natural way to introduce the conversation to help our advisors raise that.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for not bringing the other speakers in, but I'm going to do that now. We provide a lot of training for professional advisors about how to have values-based discussions, and I think it's wonderful what you guys are doing. Imogene, when you look at this from a slightly different perspective, you're on a different point on the spectrum of capital. What do you pull out of what Emily was saying that's relevant to what you're doing in terms of your approach to measuring impact?
So SOS Children's Villages, we use impact to understand and show how the real difference that programs make in children's and families' lives. And we very much try to do that beyond just counting outputs. So we have social impact assessment methods that look at the long-term effects of family strengthening and our alternative care services across different countries and contexts. And that, of course, informs organizational strategy, program design, and, of course, importantly, conversations with donors and their advisors. And we also publish evidence and reports. And it's really important for us to combine both the quantitative and the qualitative data to really demonstrate the contributions that are being made to children's well-being and family development. And of course, we also track progress against global goals like the UN Sustainable Development Goals as well. And in practice, for us, and especially from my role as a fundraiser, it's very important that any project supported by a philanthropist built into that will be the meal element of the project. And we collect and we analyze data, as I mentioned, things like, depending on the project, well-being outcomes, family stability, education and social progress. And of course, we use that to communicate the results to our donors and our partners, and ultimately inform future projects working with the community. I think, for me, one of the interesting things is that as a service delivery and implementing partner, it's really important. Sometimes we find that funders lean towards things that are easier to count and that they are not always what matters most in people's lives. So it's really important for me as a fundraiser, that intermediary between the project designer and the funder is to try and get that across. So, for example, I'm thinking of two children in the same community. Let's call them Samir and Layla. So Samir is part of an after-school tutoring program. It's a great project, and we can measure attendance, test scores, grade progression. We can show clear and tidy graphs about improved learning outcomes, and it really does fit beautifully into log frames and dashboards. Layla, on the other hand, has experienced trauma and family breakdown, and what she really needs is long-term consistent support from a trusted adult, help rebuilding a sense of safety, and her caregiver also needs support so that she can stay in a stable home. And really, the most important changes in her life are things like feeling safe enough to sleep through the night and learning to trust adults again, and her caregiver feeling less overwhelmed. So these outcomes are real and they are profound, but they're slower, they're harder to quantify, and they don't sit neatly in a 6-month reporting cycle often. So where fundraising decisions lean on what is most measurable, Samir's tutoring program gets funding year on year because numbers are clean, it's comparable. Whereas the more relational preventative work that could really change the entire trajectory of Layla's life struggles to compete because its impact is deeper, but it's less easily reduced to metrics. So it's really important that we end up with a system that optimizes, yes, what looks good on a spreadsheet, quantitative data will always be incredibly important, but also what children and families say actually helps them the most, because that's the whole point of funding these projects in the first place, is to make a real and measurable difference.
So when you're looking at the complexity of measurement, but also the complexity of communicating what's appropriate, and you've given some really good examples there. How are you changing your messaging? When we talked to Emily, we both talked about the change in approach of Gen Z millennials and wealthy women of wealth to a much more values-based approach where impact is really important, etc. Has there been a change in the way you report because of the change in that, or is it just something that's not naturally flowed easily?
I mean, I think a lot of that is built on the trust and the relationship that you build with that funder over time, and about, for us as the implementing partner, it's setting out that stall early. And once we've competed to actually secure the funds, it's making sure that the funder really understands why they're supporting the work that they're supporting. For me, the way I do that with my donors is through storytelling, the storytelling that's most important to them. And I'm sure people from nonprofits watching this will be like nodding away, going, yes, yes, because a donor doesn't say, we decided to give to you because we love that impact data, we love that pie chart, we love that, that statistic about 8 in 10, whatever, of your participants. They think about Amina living in India and how her life has completely changed, and now she can look after her children. So there's a trust, there's a relationship piece to be built there, but also it's about how we use all of the tools in our toolkit when we're talking to our donors and their advisors about, yes, quantitative is incredibly important, but that qualitative piece, we know, the human brain makes decisions based on emotion. Now, you will back it up with facts afterwards, but generally the heart will always make the decision first. And so from my point of view, as ultimately a fundraiser, yes, I can provide the stats, but I need to get you in the heart. And that's how you create, donors that come back time and time again.
I completely agree with that. And we found the same thing of impact reporting, that whilst people, as in impact reporting on an investment strategy, people do like the stats and they gravitate towards the stats, and the stats can be a useful comparator against for one investment versus another. But what brings it to life is the case studies, the stories of the underlying. That's what really gets the buy-in. So it's important to have a balance of, some headline figures that people can compare and account against, and then some underlying stories to really demonstrate the actual real world change. It must be quite hard for you, Alex, there, because you're trying to do that comparison piece, aren't you?
Alex, you've been so patient there, sitting there.
No,
So, can you? What's your take on all this?
I mean, it's a really interesting conversation, so I'm very happy to listen. I mean, the comparison piece is a really interesting point. If a donor comes to us and says that they are interested in that, I mean, one of the things MPC does is that we often look at an organization's impact practice to understand the impact that they're creating. How robust is your measurement system? Do you actually understand what you're doing? I mean, I would say ultimately at the heart of this, and I have worked for small charities. I know that this is not the case in the real world. Measuring your impact should be about you really understanding as an organization, are you actually doing anything good? Are you making the difference that you set out to do? It should not be led by funders and donors. I appreciate that is the idealized situation. It doesn't always sit like that, but it should be led by you as an organization to really understand the difference you're creating. So when people come to us and say, philanthropists come to us and say that they're interested in a certain subject area, a certain geography, a certain organization, we will often look in a number of factors. But in terms of impact, we really focus on the impact practice of the organization and then understand the impact they're creating. And the reason for that is you often hear it's like comparing apples and pears. It's not like comparing apples and pears. It's like comparing apples and sports cars. The difference organizations create is so different. I will often have funders say to me, is it better if I fund, a very deep intervention with 5 young people or a light touch intervention that reaches 5,000 young people? And the answer, of course, is it depends what you're trying to achieve as a donor. What is your passion? What is driving you? And then you can understand the difference. Because, of course, the thing that we need in our sector is we need a diverse range of donors. We need people who are interested in funding deep work with 5 young people, and we need people who are happy to fund those light touch interventions so that we can work with people at all sorts of different levels. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question exactly, but I think often we will focus on the impact practice. If we think that an organization has robust impact practice, and then we can say that we have confidence in the data that they're putting out, but we will focus at that point first.
Is impact practice causation or correlation?
Yes, I mean, that will be a part of it. I mean, we will often try to understand an organization's theory of change. Is it a robust theory of change? Have they practically thought out the steps from the intervention that they are trying to put through to the outcomes and impacts that they're trying to create? Do they have the measurement processes and systems in place to think about it? If I'm being entirely honest with you, I don't think as a sector we're particularly good at kind of attribution and contribution. It is a bit of a woolly science anyway, so I think it's quite hard to do. And I think one of the things that's really important in this is if we're thinking of charities that philanthropists are doing, and I know Emily's kind of works with different sorts of organizations as well. Majority of charities are quite small organizations. They are quite under-resourced organizations. They live in a kind of relatively hand-to-mouth existence. I don't mean that in a critical way. That is just the reality of how they interact. Their ability to really measure and get into the weeds of contribution and attribution is really, really difficult. If funders are really, really interested, if that's the thing you really, really want to know, you should pay for it, and you should find an expert who can go and do it. And that could be a academic, that could be a consultancy. You could pay for them to employ staff to do this. I used to fund very large programs when I was at the lottery, multi-million pound programs, and we would put evaluations by the side, and we would put experts within organizations because we knew that was important, and we also knew it's very difficult in real life situations which are messy and complicated, and all those sorts of things, to really get that kind of level of data.
Imogene, you're at the coalface, I think that's a proper term, around all this in terms of trying to raise money. And these are really difficult times to raise money. Many charities are struggling and cutting back and stuff. And the changes in funding, for example, out of the US, we talked to someone the other day who had a budget of 700 million, and because of the cuts, they're now at 500 million. Well, that's a pretty significant cut. So it's really difficult. Are you finding in fundraising that having an impact analysis or an outcomes analysis is helpful? And the reason I ask that to a certain extent is what I found in some of the stuff that I've been doing in the past, that there's a lot of people that still support a case for support, which in effect is an emotive ask. And I think that's something what you were both talking about there, about telling stories and relationship, et cetera, et cetera. But there's also a shift that's taking place around moving away from that to a business case. So some funders are into the emotive ask, some are into the business case, which is more rational, logical, which I think goes against what you were saying about emotion and stuff. So are you picking up on those changes? Have they started to hit you yet? And how are you addressing those? I know we're way outside of the questions we agreed right now. So anyway.
No, it's actually a really interesting point, and one that I'm so glad that Alex has made first, because as the fundraiser, wearing my non-profit hat, we always bang on about funding core costs, admin fee, which is a term I never use, but that kind of stuff. And impact measurement falls right into that. Funders and their advisors, and the best do, but many still don't, recognise that robust measurement and the reporting are not free. So if you give me £10,000, £8,000 of that will go directly to that programme, and it will help those families and those children. This is for SOS Children's Villages. And £2,000 of that will be a contribution to both the running of the core costs, that's me, your communication, the account management, but it also goes to the measurement, the evaluation, the assessment, and the learning as well. and you're getting, 20%. You get quite a lot for that 20%. So we have to have that robust impact measurement piece in place, so then I can go to the next funder and make the case for core cost recovery. Alex?
No, I was just,
Gonna...
when you're finished, I thought you raised a great
No,
point.
I'm done. Make sure core costs are always part of it.
Yes, no, I think it's really important. I was just really pleased you
Sorry,
raised the learning point as well.
let me interrupt for a second. Emily, we'll come back to you and see what you think of all this from a completely different perspective. So Alex, go ahead, and then we'll come back to Emily around this.
I was just really pleased you raised the point around learning. I think as organizations, like, that is one of the key parts of this. Yes, we should have impact data where we can. We should try and understand what works. We should try and understand what doesn't work. That is just as important. But when I was a funder, I would, what really mattered to me was, I had certain fiduciary duties. I did need to see a budget at the end to see how you spent your money. That is something I do need to do. So I would have a look at that. I did need to understand, you had said you were going to try and reach this number of people and do this number of outcomes. Like, where are you against that? But actually, what I really cared about as a funder was, what did you learn? What didn't work? What did you do differently? What would you do differently next time? Because actually, that helps me as a funder. Because then I get an application in from someone and they say something like, we're going to run this program and we're going to achieve this in 2 years. And I was quite happy to go back to them and say, you won't achieve that in 2 years. You might do it in 4 years. So why don't you ask for 4 years of funding? Because that is much more in line with what you actually need. So I think that we've talked a lot about impact data, evidence, outcomes and things, but I think learning is a really, really key part of this as well.
And just to tie that up, what I would say is that at SOS Children's Villages, our family strengthening programs are, for example, a minimum of 5 years. And we wouldn't accept funding for less than 3 years of that. And that learning piece, okay, it's a 5-year program, but no 1 year of that is ever the same, because the program participants change, their needs change, and so it's always adapting and always learning. And I think that is essential for us and for our improvement and the improvement of participants' lives. And that ties back into having an open, honest, accountable conversation with your funders, when you're able to say, this worked, this didn't, we'd like to change this, and having those open, trustworthy channels. And I know trust is a big part of what Emily was talking about as well. That's essential.
It's interesting when you're talking about this, you're talking about direct delivery, helping people and stuff. But for infrastructure support groups who don't do direct delivery, but support systems, it is extremely difficult to raise money, but it's also extremely difficult to measure impact. Because, I mean, in our case, for example, we're trying to increase money for good. So we want more and better philanthropy, more and better impact investing. Well, I mean, how do you do a causal relationship in that? It's practically impossible. And so being an infrastructure support group is really difficult to raise funds for. Emily, they talk about donors, they talk about clients, they talk about support, but from your perspective, you have clients who, some of whom are trying to achieve impact, some of whom just want to get more money. What's the parallels for you in terms of some of the key issues they've been talking about, and whether any of these bubble up for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I'd just like to say, Imogen, we also have a philanthropic offering here where we help our clients to give more effectively. And one important thing I always try and install on our clients is, don't ask too much of the charities. If they've got key KPIs that they're already reporting, that's what you should expect from them. I really dislike it when people, give large sums of money, but then expect something really new and really complicated that diverts a charity's attention from its core purpose, which is giving impact. So I think that's a really important part of effective philanthropy. Don't ask too much of the charity. When it comes to impact investing, obviously what we're doing is for profit. It is for profit. We're not gifting money away here. And that means we're largely investing in corporates. There will obviously be charitable enterprises and social enterprises. And there can be, a bit more of a requirement to put that burden of reporting on these organisations. What I would say at the moment is that the data set is very small. If you look across a global investment universe, the number of companies who are reporting tangible KPI impacts is very, very small. And that creates a significant limitation for impact reporting. It's an area that we've been engaging on companies with, trying to encourage them to measure these outcomes from their products and services and integrate that into their strategy so it becomes part of their strategy to improve those impacts. So we're not just asking them to report on it so that we can report it. We're doing so that we can encourage them to scale it, but it also has the benefit of then improving the data viability of impact reporting. And I think that's really important to us. We've always felt quite strongly that just because the data is limited today doesn't mean we shouldn't be reporting it. We need to start the momentum in this field, get people more accustomed to reporting these metrics and provide the information that we can. And hopefully that will encourage more investors to ask for it, more companies to start providing it, and a greater impact data set over the longer term.
Okay, this leads to another broader question. We might get into the detailed questions sometime, but we're moving along. I mean, I've heard outputs, I've heard outcomes, the word impact has been used, social return on investment hasn't been talked about, causation and control groups and all that kind of stuff has not been talked about. So how do we distinguish those and the importance of those, and the ability to actually do some of those? Alex, why don't you take a start at that?
Sure. As I say, I think it depends on who you are working with. Your ability to do these things is very dependent on who you are working with and how they are resourced to do that. I worked on a very large program when I was at the lottery where we would pay, significant money to expert evaluators to go and do that work, that they would run those sorts of investigations to do that. We used to fund randomized control trials and things like that. Now, the reality is that most of the, I think Imogen gave some really nice illustrations of the sorts of work she does. We work in quite a messy world. Trying to put lab-based measurement techniques on the work we do in the real world is very, very challenging. That actually most of what we will do is led by the people that we're working with, and we need to make sure it's supportive of them. So I think, again, coming back to my point around impact practice of an organization, if an organization had a randomized control trial that they could prove that their evidence is great, we would think that's fantastic. Why not? But actually, what we're looking for is...
Sorry, just for a second. Would you question the morality of that?
Would we question the morality of that?
Sorry, the ethics of that, because what you're
well, I mean, you would want them. Yeah, you want them to think about what they're doing. I mean, what I would probably more question is the practicality of it, right?
Yeah.
Like, how many interventions which occur in the real world where people come and go, and do different things and have all sorts of factors in their life really fit with a randomized control trial. I think there's challenges in terms of putting that methodology into our sector. I think it works in some spaces, it doesn't work in other spaces. But again, I would go back to the kind of idea around impact practice. Are you using recognized techniques? Are you collecting in different ways? Really importantly, are you learning from what you've done? MPC a number of years ago ran a brilliant program called Inspiring Impact, which I'd recommend people to go and have a look at. There's free resources you can download about how to understand your impact. But it was a 4-process cycle around plan, do, assess, review. And of course, it keeps going. Like you keep adapting as you're going on. So, I think if organizations are resourced enough, if they're expert enough to be able to do things, then I think that's great. I think if you are a funder or a philanthropist, for example, supporting a relatively small organization, and there is previous evidence that something works, maybe you shouldn't be expecting too much around outcomes data. Are they bringing in what we would call quality data or understanding the different ways of getting data from them? Because I think you have to be realistic. And the word we haven't, I think we've talked around it, but I don't think we've used the word specifically that is the most important thing for funders to think about is proportionality. Like, is what you're doing proportionate to the level of funding you're given in the intervention as well?
Imogen?
Can I add an insight on the ethical element that Alex raised? The Sometimes, especially in fragile or conflict affected contexts, more data collected can actually mean more risk for the very people that you are trying to support and help. So, you know, if there's a girl who is receiving psychosocial support through a community program and she's been displaced by conflict, you know, often a donor might ask for reporting, you know, age of these participants, location, type of support, family situation, outcome over time. And on paper, that looks like really good accountability. But actually, for this girl, you know, being formally recorded as a displaced girl, receiving support linked to a particular organisation could potentially put her at risk if that information were exposed or accessed by the wrong local actor. Even storing personal histories for some of these individuals or precise locations can be incredibly dangerous, whether at armed groups or authorities or even community members that could potentially misuse that information. So there's a real balance that teams on the ground face. It's, you know, it's an ethical tension between collecting the level of donors that details sometimes the details that donors are asking for, or do you hold back, or do you anonymize, or do you aggregate data for those kind of people. So sometimes safer programming means less granular reporting as well. And sometimes a lot of funding reporting frameworks reward volume and detail of data and not necessarily the good judgment of actually when not to collect it. And a very important word that we haven't mentioned is around safeguarding and doing no harm for our participants, and actually responsible data minimization, especially in those fragile settings, really is a sign of quality and it's not a sign of weakness. So I think that's just a point I wanted to raise.
It's a really complex area, isn't it? Emily, you wanted to say something?
I did, because actually it relates to experiences we've had for our reporting based on like quantity of data and value of that data. So we started doing our in-depth annual sustainability and impact reports for our flagship sustainable funds back in 2020. And that at that point, we all got very excited and made the reports super, super long. And as things evolved and got more integrated, we started pulling in more methodologies and more insights, and it got longer and longer and longer to the point where nobody wanted to read it. I didn't want to write it anymore, and people didn't want to read it. So we had to think about what was actually valuable for our investors. What do they want to know? It's our job to wade through that volume of information and surface the things that are actually relatable and interesting and help inspire confidence in your decisions. Because what I've seen time and time again is if you make it too complicated for people, they will avoid it. You make it feel like something alien that they need to invest too much time in to understand, and it just turns them off, essentially. So you absolutely need to make it digestible.
Do your advisors have the kinds of conversations and educate your clients around their philanthropy, you know, especially stuff that was just mentioned by Imogen and some of the issues when they're in different situations?
Is that a question for me? So yeah, I just want to be completely clear. So we have a philanthropic offering. So we help support our clients with their philanthropic giving through structuring, tax efficiency, and connecting them with the right philanthropic advisors. We don't do the philanthropic advice in terms of who to donate to ourselves. That's really important because we are privileged to be the larger investor on behalf of charities and foundations in the UK, and there'd be quite a big conflict of interest if we are recommending some charities.
No, I'm not talking about recommending, I'm talking about educating, so that's easier for groups like Imogen's to actually explain to a funder that there's a risk.
Yeah, absolutely. So we provide a lot of education to our clients on effective philanthropy and giving, like workshops, guest speakers. We have a practical philanthropy webpage where we get excellent insights from experts in the field.
Okay.
I mean, I'll pick up on that because we do a lot of philanthropy advice as well. And, you know, I think it is incumbent upon you as an advisor to educate people and take them on a journey. They may want a certain level of data, they may want something that comes out of it, and you need to highlight whether that's practical, whether that's possible, whether that is the most useful way to do it. The other thing I think funders need to do, which I'm going off topic slightly, but I think it's important to say, is I when funders are thinking about the data they want in, I think it's really incumbent upon them to, if you look at IVAR's open and trusting grant making principles, which are a great set of values, only ask for data that you're actually going to use. Funders sit on a vast wealth of information, data, learning, but are not always using it most effectively. So
Or
if
sharing
you
it.
are going, yeah, if you are going to ask for that information, what do you need that information for? I said earlier, I needed a budget at the end of a grant making. I needed that because I had to report that internally. What did I actually need in order as a funder that I could move on? So I think it's really important funders should do that. And you mentioned about sharing, John. I'll pop something in the chat. My colleague Tris Lumley, we've just launched a new resource and program today called Opening Up Impact. We believe, I think Emily was talking about kind of systemic change earlier, that in order to move to systemic change, we actually need to open up the impact economy and the knowledge that it holds, so it is available much more freely. I'll pop a link in the chat. It's a really interesting
Okay.
paper and a program that we're going to be launching.
Thank you. Emily, I'm going to switch a tiny bit here. There's, in terms of the role of your advisors, there's 23 distinct services that a client needs on their philanthropic journey or on their impact investment journey. No firm, no wealth management firm would have the ability to deliver all 23. In the US, to a certain extent, you'll have charities supporting advisors to support the advisors' clients. So you get charities sometimes in the same room as advisors. Here, it's not quite as clear as that. Do you see where a charity, the images of this world, can actually work as a trusted partner with you around some of your clients and supporting some of the things that they may need on their philanthropic journey?
Really good question. So on a philanthropic journey wise, I mean, we do work with charitable and social enterprises who help provide the provision of philanthropic advice. So absolutely, partner with the experts. For instance, we will be running a series of philanthropic workshops for our clients over the course of this year that is being facilitated by an external foundation who's specifically focused on this. So I think absolutely they're at the forefront of the knowledge in this area, and it can be really valuable. What I'd also like to add is that when we're thinking about sustainable and impact investing, our charities that we manage the investments for have been amazing sources of information for the challenges that are happening down on the ground prior to becoming well known in the investment sphere. One of the key examples I have is that our clients were raising concerns about biodiversity and nature to us back in 2020. This is way before it came into the sphere of terminology within the investment industry in any meaningful way. And that's because they're down on the ground dealing with these challenges on a day-to-day basis. So we often lean on our clients to give us these insights on what are the challenges that you are seeing and facing. How can we reflect those in our investment strategies and account for those forthcoming risks and opportunities?
Okay, great. Thank you. There are some questions in the chat. Can you open up the chat? There's one for Emily, and I think there's another one there. Can we just take a step back for a second? If we just go near the top, the question from Cleo Hughes, start with that one. In your conversations with clients who want to support humanitarian work and global impact, what are you hearing most often about the type of impact information reporting that helps them feel confident in their giving? Imogene, is this something that you can talk about a bit? I know we've covered bits and pieces of this. Do you see the question?
Yes.
Yeah. Emily, you take this one.
Okay.
Well, it was directed to me, but I actually think it might be better for you, Alex, if I'm honest, if I'm reading it correctly, because it says giving at the end, which is therefore thinking about what inspires people to be more confident in their giving and their philanthropy, which is different
Yeah,
from impact investing. If it's
yeah,
about impact investing, I am happy to answer it, and I
yeah.
gave a brief answer. But Alex, I think that is for you.
No, fair enough. I will give it a go. I am probably going to give a bit of a politician's answer, and I apologize for this to the person who
Then don't
posted
do
it.
it.
I think it depends, is the honest answer. I think with all of these things, I think we talk about funders, philanthropists, as if there is a group, and this is what they all look like, and this is how they operate, and this is how they act. John, you alluded to earlier, like some of the next generation coming through, women coming through, are more interested in impact. They are more interested in collaboration. But in terms of, is there a specific thing that I think is going to do that? I think it's quite a hard question to answer, because we often, the advice that we give, and there's a report on our website called What Makes a Good Charity. I apologize for the title. I don't really like it. It was written about 10 years ago. But if you see it's got 4 domains, which is the advice that we give our clients. So we give them advice around an organization's mission, around their impact practice, around their financial health, and around their leaders, actually. And I find a lot of my clients are really interested in leaders. But actually, and I think it goes back to something Imogen was saying earlier, that you are going to have to give a balanced story to people with data and stories. People are going to want a bit of both of those worlds so that they can see the difference that they are making. I think I don't think there's a specific type of impact information that I would say this is all donors are going to be really interested in this. I think to some extent it's getting to know your donors, but also understanding what's possible for you as an organization. Collect the data that you need as an organization that you can then report to them in that way. But I think you need that balance of kind of qual and quant to give that picture.
Imogen, you made points earlier about how important it is to personalize, to know your clients or donors, etc. Maybe you can just add to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So in my day-to-day existence, I look after 29 individual groups of donors. Some of them are families, some of them are couples, some of them are individuals. And I take 29 approaches to reporting, which is a lot, but the heart of that starts with understanding why they are supporting SOS Children's Villages in the first place. What has motivated them to come to us? How are their values aligned with ours, reflecting on what Emily said before? And what do they want from it? Some of my biggest donors honestly want a nice picture and a human impact story, and just to be told that we didn't go over budget, and that is it. Some, and now these are my philanthropists, these are not sort of big foundations and corporate funders. So these philanthropists, it's about making that human connection, but some do want a very complex log frame that aligns with our theory of change for that project, and it is much more involved. But we have built their expectations through the relationship that we've built and that dialogue. But for me, most of the donors who give repeatedly are the ones who understand the work that SOS Children's Villages does, the limitations in which we operate, and the limitations of what we can and can't report on, and the size of the gift as well. A £10,000 gift is not going to get the same reporting as a £1 million gift, but I will always try and balance what the donor is interested in. So if I know they like, I've got a chap who funds a wonderful project in Brazil, and he used to be financial services guy, been retired for a long time, but I know that numbers are good for him. So my reporting always starts with a few bullet points leading on that, and then we'll do some other bits. So probably the non-profit representatives don't want to hear that, but for me, it's very personal. It's all about what the donors want and building that rapport.
Yeah, I want to reinforce that because when I used to go in and run charities in Canada, there was this one instance where there was this person whose husband was very wealthy and he died, and then she was quite interested in the organization. So we met every Thursday afternoon to have a glass of scotch and to talk about books. And then when she died, a large chunk of money was left to the organization. So I mean, it's pretty personal stuff. We're just about out of time, but Emily, there's a question in there for you about, can you see it, about what helps inspire philanthropic giving? still investing for profit, etc.? Do you see that question? Traceability, etc.
So that was
Yes.
my reply to Chloe's
Oh,
question. I think it was
oh,
posted twice.
okay. Oh, all right. Okay.
But there was another question for us,
Okay.
which
Which one's that?
was about what are your views on measuring preventative outcomes? We use case studies to do this, and it's been very effective, but I'm interested in hearing your thoughts. That's
Okay.
probably to Imogen again.
Yeah. Yeah, they are
I like
really
the way you
challenging to
guys
measure.
keep pushing things onto other people in this team. Well done. Excellent. I like that.
Yeah, they are incredibly challenging to measure, especially in the kind of work that SOS Children's Villages does, because it means something negative did not happen. So a child not entering care or a family not reaching crisis. So we use proxy indicators kind of linked to reduced risk. So around things like caregiver stress, family stability, school attendance. And then we also look at trends like fewer protection referrals or family separations over time. And somebody, I think it was Gwen in the chat, talked about how if programs are built with and for the community by the community, it's incredibly important. And that obviously leads to longer term sustainability. What I would also say about preventative outcomes is that that's where that qualitative evidence is really important, because families themselves saying what support helped them cope before things escalated is in itself that prevention in action. So it's looking at risk reduction, resilience, patterns, and lived experience, really.
Okay,
And it's similar, if I can jump in, because it's similar in our world of reporting outcomes from the investments that we make, because those are largely preventative in nature of what they're trying to do. You know, you're housing people to prevent them going into extreme poverty, and you're providing essential and affordable medicines to prevent people from getting sick. You are providing clean and renewable energy sources to reduce carbon emissions from being released into the atmosphere through dirty fossil fuels. So the reality is that all of it is largely preventative outcomes that you are looking to report.
Okay, we just got a couple of minutes left, so I have two questions. So I'll ask them one. I'll ask the first one, and whoever wants to go first can go first. So, has there been a question that I've not asked that you thought I should have asked? And what is it? Alex, you can go first because you're smiling the most.
It's a great question. And I'm now frantically looking at my notes to see the things I was going to say today and have I said them or not. And of course, my handwriting is terrible, so that's quite difficult. One of the things I was going to mention, which is quite a, that I think people should just be aware of to have a look at is there is a new requirement for charities around SORP. SORP is the statement of recommended practice. It's kind of how you present your accounts. There is an impact reporting requirement within SORP these days. So we think that's a really positive thing, but actually drawing it together, thinking about charities, really thinking about how their impact works. It is tiered depending on the size of organization you are, that there's quite clear guidance on it. But I suppose I would say, I'm not sure it's a question you should have asked, John, but of all the
That
things I
doesn't
wanted
get
to say,
you. That doesn't get you off the hook, Alex.
oh, fair enough. If there's things that you are looking at as an organization and are not aware of the changes to SORP, they came into force in
Okay.
January, so I'd have a look at those.
Okay. Emily.
I've got a good one. I mean, this is normally what people ask me first of all, which is, do you have to give up capital in order to invest in a sustainable or impactful way? And in our experience, that absolutely hasn't been the case and doesn't need to be the case. As long as you create a sensible strategy that your advisor has helped you to formalize, that still allows for ample diversification in the portfolio, you can absolutely keep up with an unconstrained approach returns. And a good example is our flagship sustainable multi-asset funds have quite significantly outperformed their peer groups, which are unconstrained peer groups, since we launched them, which is a great attestation to the fact that we haven't had to give up financial performance. How I will caveat that is if you go very, very deep impact and very, very specific on the impact that you want to create, you're going to have a really narrow investable universe, and therefore you will absolutely have quite different returns. What we like to recommend is that you allow yourself to have a broad, sustainable portfolio with good impact characteristics, and then a very specific impact carve out where you can afford to be a bit riskier and a bit narrower, with that impact intention being the primary objective.
What's the question? Sorry, that's my weird sense of humor. Okay, so I'm there is something that a lot of advisors say, that if a big chunk of the money that I'm managing is given away as philanthropic giving, then I lose out on that in terms of fees. But there are a number of, if you put money into, so do you want to address that? But also, if you put money into a donor advice fund, many donor advice funds allow the managers to still continue to. Some of them don't, some do. Do you want to answer that question so that you can, because
Yeah,
it's a myth.
absolutely.
I think it's a myth.
Yeah, definitely. So donor advised funds are an amazing tool to run alongside your for-profit investment portfolio. It allows you to carve out a portion of your assets for charity, park them into a portfolio that then receives all of the charitable benefits that you would have from launching your own charity. But you can continue to manage those investments whilst you distribute them to charity over time. And that means that you can invest them impactfully. So you are continuing to grow those assets over time whilst giving away the profits. And that creates a wonderful sense of circularity in that pot, because it's not just a one-time gift, it's a long-term giving strategy that can grow ahead of inflation and have impact whilst it's growing, because you're investing it impactfully. So
okay, so
yes,
it is a myth.
Yes, and the rate of distribution tends to be around 20%. Like, it varies very significantly, but on average, it's around 20% from those DAF portfolios. So it doesn't create a significant headwind for advisors losing assets.
Okay. Imogen, what question do you think I should have asked and I haven't?
Well, I'm not sure what your question would have been, but my answer is I would like to see professional advisors engage more with delivery organisations. I was on a training course last year, and there's a sort of bunch of fundraisers all sitting together going, yeah, but how do you find these philanthropy, So, well, first of all, I got asked, how do you find philanthropists? And I said, oh, that's a tough question. And then we went on to, well, how do you find their advisors? And they're going, yeah, that's also tough. I mean, obviously, I recommended Philanthropy Impact, but
and Casno Capital.
And Casno Capital. But what I would say is that I think advisors should reach out more to delivery organisations, not because it might bring more donors to the organisation, to the charity, but it's about meeting in the middle. It's about understanding, having a dialogue, so that there are expectations around impact, around what can be achieved, around the hopes and dreams of the funder. What does that look like in reality? Because we're the experts in delivering that work. And I would just love to see philanthropy advisors engage more with us directly.
Okay, we have specialized training for advisors around that. We also have specialized training for high-value major donor fundraisers about how to establish relationships with and work as a trusted partner with advisors. Okay, thank you. I think we're just out of time, but can I have 30 seconds of your time, each one of you? 30 seconds, all right? Final words of wisdom. Who would like to go first? Emily.
If you are currently have an investment strategy, whether it's the investment strategy of the organization that you work for or your personal savings, think about investing that in a sustainable or impactful way. If you need some support on what that might look like, reach out to advisors. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, and we can help you think about what that might look like.
Great,
we need more people to be doing this, and then we can actually create systemic change.
Alex, 30 seconds.
Sure.
Wisdom.
I think, starting with the understanding impact reporting should start with you as an organization and understanding what works, so that you can make sure that your services are as important as possible. I think for funders and philanthropists, be realistic, be proportionate about what you can actually get from people. And remember that when you sit on that wealth of data, it is incredibly useful. So how can you open it up and share it with others so that it is more useful?
Great. Imogene, 30 seconds, final words of wisdom.
I think when you're looking to give a gift that really does have an impact, bear in mind the meaningful, not just the measurable, because ultimately the work that the charities and the non-profits do is ultimately to help improve better lives, and that shouldn't be constrained by your reporting requirements.
Great, thank you. This is an extremely complex area, and I think we've made it human, which is really good. I would have liked to talk about the impact economy and how that is fitting into all of this. I would have liked to talk about crypto and Web3 and how that helps with impact analysis. We put on a conference yesterday on crypto for good, and over 250 or so people were around that. It was brilliant, some of the stuff that people were saying about how they're helping and things. So great. All right. Thank you very much to all three of you.